Someone said something last week, and you're still carrying it. Maybe it was criticism that made your stomach drop, or praise that felt hollow an hour later. Either way, you're exhausted from replaying conversations, rewriting responses in your head, needing the next compliment just to feel okay. This isn't weakness. This is what happens when other people's words hold more power over your peace than you do. Tonight, you'll discover 3 ancient qualities that make some people completely unshakable, not hardened or numb, just deeply free. Free from needing praise, free from fearing criticism, anchored in something no storm can touch. The Buddha taught that suffering comes from clinging to what we want and pushing away what we fear. When we cling to praise and fear criticism, we're trapped in this ancient pattern. But there's another way, a way that's been working for 25 centuries. Through real examples from everyday life and authentic Buddhist wisdom, you'll learn exactly how these 3 qualities work and how to cultivate them in your own life, starting tonight. Before we begin, make yourself comfortable. Adjust your pillow, pull a blanket close if you'd like. Let your body find its most restful position. If it feels right, share where you're listening from in the comments. We're all here together tonight. Take one breath with me now. And as you exhale, know that for the next 3 hours, you don't need to be anyone other than exactly who you are. Let's begin. You're driving down a highway on a sunny afternoon. The road stretches ahead of you, smooth and wide, and you're making good time. Then you see it, a small warning sign on the side of the road with a camera icon. Instantly, without even thinking, your foot eases off the gas pedal. You glance at your speedometer. Everyone around you does the same thing at the exact same moment. The whole highway slows down in perfect synchronization, like a flock of birds turning together in the sky. And then, a kilometer later, once the radar is safely behind you, everyone speeds up again. This tiny moment tells us something important about how we make choices. Why did you slow down? What made everyone around you do the exact same thing? And more importantly, what happens when there's no camera watching? Let's look at 5 different reasons people choose to do the right thing, to be kind, to follow the rules. Understanding these reasons will help you see why other people's words, their criticism, their praise, have so much power over your peace right now. The first reason is simple. Nobody wants to get in trouble with the law. Nobody wants to pay a fine. Nobody wants to deal with police or courts. So, you slow down when you see that speed camera. You pay your taxes because the penalties are steep. You follow traffic laws because getting pulled over is inconvenient and expensive. This works, but only when someone's watching. When the threat is visible, take away the camera and the behavior changes. The second reason is what other people think. You might do something that won't land you in jail, but it could cost you socially. Your friends might stop calling. Your family might give you that look at dinner. You might not get invited to the next gathering. You've felt this one. That moment at a family dinner when you bite back what you really want to say because you know the cost. That careful editing of your social media posts because you're aware who's watching. That fake smile when someone tells a joke you don't find funny, but everyone else is laughing. You're performing, constantly aware of your audience, exhausted from managing your image. These first two reasons, fear of punishment and fear of judgment, keep society running smoothly. But they don't come from inside you. They're external forces, and they only work when someone's watching. Now we come to the third reason, and something shifts here. This one is about self-respect. It's that moment when you think, I won't do this because it's beneath me. I have principles. Maybe no one will ever know. Maybe you could get away with it completely, but you would know. And you have to live with yourself. This is when you keep your promise, even though breaking it would be easier and no one would find out. When the cashier gives you too much change and you give it back, not because someone's watching, but because you've decided who you want to be. When you tell the truth, even though a small lie would solve everything. You're not checking for cameras anymore. You're checking in with yourself. The fourth reason is compassion, genuine care for others. You don't want to hurt people, not because you're afraid of consequences, but because you know what pain feels like. Maybe you've been on the receiving end of harsh words, so you're careful with your speech now. Maybe you've felt the sting of betrayal, so you're trustworthy, not because it benefits you, but because you can't bear to create that pain for someone else. Maybe you've known loneliness, so you naturally reach out to include others without thinking about what you'll gain. This isn't duty anymore. This is love. The fifth reason is understanding how life actually works. In Buddhism, this is called karma, not punishment from the universe, but simple cause and effect. When you see clearly how your actions shape your life, harmful choices stop making sense. It's like understanding that if you plant thorns, you'll harvest thorns. This isn't about believing in rebirth or cosmic justice. It's much simpler than that. When you speak harshly to someone, that harshness doesn't just affect them, it lives in you. It trains your mind. It becomes part of how you move through the world. When you act with generosity, you're not just helping someone else. You're cultivating abundance in your own heart first. When you practice patience, you're building your own capacity for peace. Now here's what matters for tonight, for understanding why words have so much power over you. Those first two reasons, legal trouble and social judgment, only work when there's an audience. They're like that speed camera, present and powerful when visible, gone the moment you're out of sight. If you're still living primarily from these two reasons, then other people's opinions, control your entire sense of self. You need their approval to feel okay. You fear their criticism, like you fear that ticket in the mail. Think about what this means in real life. If you're checking for cameras before deciding how to act, you're living in a kind of prison. Maybe a comfortable prison, but still, your behavior changes based on who's in the room. You're constantly adjusting, performing, calculating. That's why you're so tired. That's why someone's criticism can ruin your whole week. That's why praise feels good for 5 minutes, and then you're hungry for more. You're trying to get your sense of worth from people who might not even remember what they said to you tomorrow. But the last 3 reasons, self-respect, compassion, and understanding, these work even when you're completely alone. They work at 3 in the morning, when no one's watching. They work when no one will ever know what you did or didn't do. These come from inside, and they're the only things that create real change. This is where people who stay calm in storms live, not in the world of cameras and crowds, but in the world of genuine understanding. The Buddha taught something important about this. True freedom doesn't come from having no rules or not caring what anyone thinks. It comes from wisdom. When your choices flow from understanding rather than fear, you're no longer controlled by circumstances. You carry something steady inside you that doesn't need external validation to exist. Let me give you a concrete example of how this plays out. Imagine someone criticizes your work in a meeting. If you're living from those first 2 reasons, fear of trouble and fear of judgment, this criticism hits like a physical blow. Your heart races. Your face gets hot. You replay the moment for days. You can't sleep because you're composing better responses in your head. Why? Because your entire sense of safety depends on what that person thinks. Their opinion is the camera, and you just got caught speeding. But if you've cultivated those last 3 qualities, if you have genuine self-respect, if you care about doing good work from compassion, if you understand how your actions create results, then that same criticism lands differently. You can pause and ask, is this feedback useful? Does it show me something I need to improve? If yes, you take it in with gratitude. If no, you let it pass. Either way, it doesn't destroy you because your sense of worth isn't sitting in that person's hands. Or imagine someone praises you lavishly. If you're living from those first 2 reasons, this praise creates a brief high followed by emptiness. You need more. You start adjusting your behavior to get more praise. You become addicted to external validation, always performing, always checking if people noticed. But if you've built that internal foundation, you can receive praise with simple gratitude. Thank you, that's kind of you to say. It doesn't inflate you because you're not empty inside, desperately needing someone to tell you you're okay. And when the praise fades, which it always does, you don't crash because your peace doesn't depend on it. This is the first quality we're discovering tonight. This internal stability that doesn't depend on who's watching or what they're saying. Right now, as you're listening, try something with me. Think about a choice you made in the last few days. Anything. How you spoke to someone, whether you kept a commitment, how you handled a difficult moment. Don't judge the choice. Just notice which reason guided you. Were you worried about getting caught? Were you concerned about what people would think? Or did it come from somewhere deeper, from your own sense of integrity, from genuine care, from understanding? Most of us, if we're honest, will find we're still checking for cameras a lot of the time. That's okay. That's not something to feel ashamed about. It's just information. You're becoming aware, and awareness is always the first step. The path we're walking tonight is about strengthening those inner qualities until they become stronger than any external pressure. It's about learning to act well, not because someone's watching, but because you've become someone who naturally chooses wisdom and kindness. And here's the beautiful part. Once you start living from this place, the storms of life hit differently. Criticism doesn't shake your foundation because you're not building your life on other people's approval. Praise doesn't make you desperately need more because you're already full. You're anchored in something real. But we're just beginning to see how this works. Because even when all the cameras are off, even when every other person has left the room, there's still someone watching. Always. And that someone is you. You are your own constant witness. You see every choice you make. You hear every thought that crosses your mind. You know the quality of your intentions. There's no hiding from this, no escaping it. You can turn off all the cameras, close all the doors, make sure no other human being knows. But you will always know. And this is actually good news. Because if you're your own constant witness, you can also become your own wise guide. You can develop that internal voice that doesn't punish or shame, but gently steers you toward what's true and beneficial. This is what the ancient teachings point to when they talk about mindfulness, not as a stress reduction technique, but as continuous awareness of your own heart. Knowing when you're acting from fear or from love, from wisdom or from confusion. And this knowing itself becomes the teacher. When you've built this internal anchor, it becomes crucial when storms arrive. And storms will arrive. That's just part of being human. People will criticize you. People will praise you. Plans will fall apart. Circumstances will shift. And in those moments, if you've strengthened these inner qualities, self-respect, compassion, understanding, you'll have something to hold on to that the storm can't take away. Tonight, as you move through your evening, just notice which voice is guiding you. When you speak to someone, when you make a choice, which reason is operating? The one that checks for cameras? The one that worries about judgment? Or the one that comes from deeper wisdom? Just notice. That's all. No need to force yourself to change anything. Just bring gentle awareness to this question and let that awareness itself begin the work. But what happens when the storm actually hits? What happens when criticism arrives and punches you in the gut? Or when praise creates that desperate need for more? How do these inequalities actually help you stay steady? That's where we're going next. Picture this. You're sitting in your car at a railroad crossing. The barrier is down. Red lights are flashing. A long freight train is passing in front of you. Car after car after car, moving at its own steady pace. You have somewhere to be. You're already running late. And then you hear it. Someone behind you, honking their horn. Honking at the train, as if the train will hear it and speed up. As if the engineer will think, oh, someone's in a hurry, better go faster. As if reality itself will bend to the sound of that horn. It's absurd, isn't it? And yet, how many times do you do the exact same thing? Not literally honking at trains, but fighting what cannot be changed. Arguing with what already is. Demanding that circumstances bend to your plan instead of adjusting your plan to circumstances. This small moment at the railroad crossing reveals something crucial about suffering and about the first quality of people who stay unshaken no matter what life throws at them. Let's look at what's actually happening when someone honks at that train. On the surface, it's just impatience. They want to get somewhere. The train is in the way. They're frustrated. But underneath that impatience is something deeper. Arrogance. Now, arrogance is a strong word, and we usually think of it as someone strutting around, thinking they're better than everyone else. But there's a subtler form of arrogance that most of us carry without realizing it. It's the belief that my plan, my idea of how things should be, is more valid than reality itself. You had a plan for your day. You were going to get from point A to point B in a certain amount of time. That was your mental picture of how things should unfold. Then reality shows up with a different plan, a train crossing, and something in you says, no, my plan is right. Reality is wrong. That's arrogance. That's believing your mental construction of how things should be is somehow more real, more important than what actually is. And this arrogance creates a chain reaction. Arrogance leads to impatience, and impatience leads to anger. Watch it happen inside you sometime. You're waiting in a long line at the store. You thought this would take 5 minutes, but it's been 15. First comes that arrogant thought, this shouldn't be happening. Then comes impatience, that tight feeling in your chest, that urge to make this go faster. And then comes anger at the slow cashier, at the person ahead of you, at the store. But notice, all of this suffering started with that first arrogant belief that reality should match your plan. The train doesn't care about your schedule. The line moves at the pace it moves. Traffic is what it is. Your flight gets delayed. The weather changes your outdoor plans. Someone doesn't text back as quickly as you expected. And each time, you have a choice. Accept what is, or honk at the train. In the Buddhist teachings, there's a powerful image about the nature of noble beings, people who have cultivated deep inner stability. It says they're like gold that's been cut and burned, but still shines. The gold doesn't lose its nature no matter what happens to it. You can hammer it, heat it, bury it in the ground for 1,000 years. When you dig it up, it's still gold. This is the first quality we're discovering tonight. This unshakable nature that doesn't depend on circumstances. Most of us aren't like gold yet. We're more like ice sculptures on a sunny day. Beautiful, but completely dependent on conditions staying exactly as we need them to be. When the temperature changes, when reality doesn't cooperate, we melt. But gold doesn't need perfect conditions. It remains itself, no matter what. And the people who have cultivated this quality don't fall apart when plans change, when criticism comes, when praise doesn't arrive. They remain steady, not because nothing difficult happens to them, but because they've learned to stop fighting reality. Here's what this looks like in everyday life. Someone with this quality sits in traffic without rage because they're not arguing with the fact that there's traffic. Traffic exists. Right now, in this moment, traffic is real. Getting angry doesn't change it. It just adds suffering on top of inconvenience. So they adjust. Maybe they call ahead and say they'll be late. Maybe they listen to something interesting. Maybe they just breathe and exist in the car without fighting what is. Someone with this quality receives criticism without crumbling because they're not insisting that everyone should only see their best qualities. The criticism exists. It's real. Now what? Is there truth in it worth considering? If yes, they take it in. If no, they let it pass. But either way, they're not honking at the train of someone else's opinion. This quality of being unshakable comes from developing what the Buddhist teachings call equilibrium in 4 areas of your life. Think of these as 4 different kinds of balance that work together to create inner stability. The first is attentional equilibrium, the ability to direct your attention where you want it to go, rather than being pulled around by every passing thought or distraction. When you develop this, you're not constantly hijacked by your own thoughts or by what's happening around you. The second is ethical equilibrium, knowing what's right and having the strength to do it consistently, regardless of whether anyone's watching. This is what we explored earlier with those 5 reasons for behaving well. When you've cultivated this, your actions flow from integrity rather than from fear. The third is emotional equilibrium, the ability to experience your emotions without being controlled by them. This doesn't mean becoming emotionless. It means you can feel anger without acting out of anger, feel fear without being paralyzed by it, feel joy without grasping at it desperately. Your emotions move through you like weather, real, but not permanent, powerful, but not in charge. The fourth is cognitive equilibrium, seeing reality clearly without the distortion of your own fears, desires, and fixed beliefs about how things should be. This is the antidote to that arrogance we talked about earlier. When you have cognitive equilibrium, you can see what actually is, instead of only seeing your mental picture of how things should be. These four equilibriums work together to create that gold-like quality, that ability to remain yourself, to stay grounded in what's true, no matter what circumstances you're facing. And here's why this matters so much for handling criticism and praise. When someone criticizes you, and you lose your peace for days, it's because one or more of these equilibriums is shaky. Maybe you can't direct your attention away from replaying the criticism. Maybe you're knocked off your ethical center, questioning everything about yourself. Maybe the emotional hit controls your whole mood for a week. Maybe you can't see the criticism clearly, can't distinguish between useful feedback and just one person's perspective. Or when praise comes, and you desperately need more, need constant validation to feel okay. Same thing. Your attention is glued to seeking approval. Your actions start orienting around getting more praise. Your emotional state rises and falls based on whether people notice you. You can't see yourself clearly anymore, only how others see you. But when you've developed these equilibriums, criticism and praise are just information passing through. They don't shake your foundation, because your foundation isn't built on other people's opinions. It's built on these four stable qualities inside yourself. The Buddha taught that true freedom is found in liberation from patterns that cause suffering, not liberation from the world, not freedom from ever experiencing difficulties, but liberation from the internal patterns that turn difficulties into disasters. The pattern of fighting reality, the pattern of needing approval, the pattern of losing yourself when circumstances change. When you develop these equilibriums, you're not adding something to yourself. You're removing the obstacles that keep you from being like gold, already valuable, already whole, already unshakable in your true nature. Think about the last time you really lost your peace. Maybe it was this week, maybe yesterday. Can you find the moment when you started honking at the train? The moment when you decided reality should be different than it is? Maybe someone should have responded differently. Maybe the weather should have cooperated. Maybe your body should feel different than it does. Maybe you should be further along in life than you are. That's the moment. That's when arrogance slipped in. Not the arrogance of thinking you're better than others, but the arrogance of thinking your plan is more real than reality. And from there came impatience, this restless, uncomfortable feeling that things aren't moving fast enough. And from there came anger, or anxiety, or despair, all those painful emotions that grow from fighting what is. Tonight, as you move through your life, See if you can catch yourself honking at trains, not to judge yourself for it, but just to notice. Oh, there I go again, arguing with reality. And when you catch yourself, try something radical. Accept what is. Just for one moment, stop fighting. The train is here. The traffic is here. The criticism is here. What now? How do you respond from acceptance rather than from resistance? This is how you begin to develop that unshakable quality, that gold-like nature that remains steady regardless of what life does to it. Not by never having problems, but by learning to stop adding suffering on top of difficulty. Not by controlling reality, but by developing these inner equilibriums that keep you grounded when reality doesn't match your plan. The train will pass. It always does. The question is, will you waste your energy honking at it? Or will you remain yourself, calm, clear, unshaken, while you wait? There's a story about Andres Segovia, one of the greatest classical guitarists who ever lived. After a particularly brilliant concert, someone approached him backstage, amazed by what they'd witnessed. "Maestro," they said, "you're a genius. That was extraordinary." Segovia looked at them with something close to annoyance. "Genius," he said. "Let me tell you about genius. I have practiced guitar for hours every single day for decades. My fingers have bled. My nails have broken. I have played the same passages 10,000 times until they were right. And now you call me genius? What an insult. What an insult." Those 3 words reveal something profound about how we misunderstand excellence and how that misunderstanding keeps us trapped. When we call someone a genius, we're doing something subtle but damaging. We're taking all the years of practice, all the discipline, all the failures and adjustments and persistence, and we're erasing them. We're saying, "You didn't earn this through effort. You were just born special. You descended from somewhere with a gift the rest of us don't have." And that does 2 terrible things at once. First, it robs the person of credit for their actual work. Segovia didn't wake up one day able to play like that. He built that ability note by note, hour by hour, year by year. Calling it genius makes it seem like magic, like something that just appeared fully formed. It dismisses the reality of what it actually takes to become excellent at anything. But second, and this is where it affects you directly, it lets everyone else off the hook. If Segovia is a genius, if his ability is some rare gift from birth, then you don't have to feel bad about not being at that level. Of course you can't play like that. You're not a genius. You weren't born with the gift. The genius label becomes your excuse for not trying, not practicing, not putting in the decades of work. Think about how often you do this in your own life. You see someone who's calm when everyone else is panicking, and you think they're just naturally calm. You see someone who handles criticism gracefully, and you think They're just built that way. You see someone who's genuinely kind even when it costs them something, and you think, some people are just good. And in thinking this, you've just excused yourself from developing those same qualities. The truth is more challenging and more hopeful than the genius myth. Every quality you admire in another person, their patience, their wisdom, their unshakable peace, their ability to remain kind in the face of cruelty, these were built. They weren't gifts. They were practices. Someone decided to work on these things, failed many times, kept going, and gradually became the person you now admire. In Buddhist teaching, there's this beautiful concept called Buddha nature. It says that every single person has the potential for complete awakening, complete freedom from suffering, complete wisdom and compassion. Not that everyone will develop it, but that everyone could. The seed is already there. The possibility is inherent. You already have everything you need to become unshakable in the face of criticism and praise. You already have the capacity for that gold-like quality we talked about earlier, remaining yourself regardless of circumstances. You already have Buddha nature. What you might not have yet is the willingness to practice. Because here's what separates the people who stay calm in storms from the people who get tossed around. It's not that they were born different. It's that they practiced being calm. They practiced not taking things personally. They practiced returning to their center after being knocked off balance. They did this over and over, year after year, until it became natural. Some people are just brave enough to start that practice. That's the only difference. Not smarter, not more talented, not blessed with special genes, just brave enough to say, I'm going to work on this. I'm going to notice when criticism knocks me down and practice getting back up. I'm going to notice when praise makes me desperate for more and practice letting it pass through. I'm going to practice these 4 equilibriums we talked about until they become as natural as breathing. And you can start from exactly where you are right now. Maybe right now, criticism destroys you for days. That's fine. That's just your starting point. You don't need to already be good at this. You just need to start noticing what happens when criticism comes and practice responding differently. Even 1 degree differently is progress. Maybe right now, you need constant validation from others to feel okay about yourself. That's fine too. That's where you're starting. You don't need to suddenly become self-sufficient overnight. You just need to start noticing that hunger for approval when it arises, and practice sitting with it for just a few moments before seeking the next hit of validation. The Buddhist teachings are clear about this. Noble beings aren't a special category of humans who descended from heaven with halos. They're people who did the work. They cultivated noble qualities through practice, through attention, through thousands of small choices to respond with wisdom instead of reacting from confusion. Think about what this means for how you relate to criticism and praise. When someone criticizes you, you have this moment of choice. You can react the way you always have. Defensiveness, rumination, self-attack, whatever your pattern is. Or you can practice responding differently. Just this once. Can you pause? Can you take a breath? Can you ask yourself, is there truth here worth considering? Or is this just someone else's opinion passing through? That's practice. That one moment of choosing to pause instead of react. That's how you build the quality of remaining unshaken. When someone praises you, you feel that little rush, that moment of validation. And then comes that subtle grasping. Tell me more. Notice me more. I need more of this feeling. Can you notice that grasping? Can you let the praise land with a simple thank you and then let it go without building your identity around it? That's practice too. And each time you practice, you're building something real. Those 4 equilibriums, that internal stability, that gold-like nature that doesn't change based on whether people are applauding or criticizing. The Buddha said something important about this. He said, "No one saves us, but ourselves. No one can and no one may. We ourselves must walk the path." This isn't harsh. It's liberating. It means you're not waiting for someone to fix you or gift you with peace. You're building it yourself, one practice at a time. Right now, think about something you've called impossible for yourself. Maybe you've said, "I could never stay calm when someone attacks me. I could never be free from needing approval. I could never handle criticism without falling apart." That word never, that's you calling yourself something other than what you actually are. You're calling yourself fixed, unchangeable, incapable of growth. But you have Buddha nature. You have the same potential that every awakened being has ever had. What you're actually saying is, "I'm not willing to practice this. I'm not brave enough yet to start." And that's okay. You don't have to start today. But notice that it's a choice, not a fixed limitation. The door is always open. When you watch someone remain peaceful in chaos, when you see someone accept criticism with grace, when you witness someone give and receive praise without being controlled by either, you're not watching a genius. You're watching someone who practiced, someone who was brave enough to start from wherever they were and build these qualities through attention, effort, and time. You can do the same thing, not because you're special, but because you have the same human capacity they do. Not overnight, but step by step. Not perfectly, but progressively. Now let's look at how this actually works, how you take that potential and turn it into something real in your daily life. We've discovered something important together tonight. We've seen that you have the capacity for becoming unshakable, for developing that gold-like quality that remains steady regardless of circumstances. We've seen that this isn't about being born special, it's about being willing to practice. But how does that internal stability actually grow? How do you move from understanding this conceptually to living it? It grows the same way physical strength grows, through regular practice that gradually builds capacity. When you first start lifting weights, 5 pounds might feel heavy, but you keep showing up, keep lifting, and 6 months later, 5 pounds is nothing. You didn't suddenly become a different kind of human. You built strength through repetition. Internal stability works the same way. Each time someone criticizes you, and you practice pausing instead of immediately reacting, you're building attentional equilibrium, the ability to direct your attention deliberately rather than being hijacked by emotion. It might only last for 3 seconds at first. That's fine. Next time, maybe it's 5 seconds. You're building capacity. Each time you notice that desperate craving for more praise, and you practice sitting with it, instead of immediately seeking the next validation, you're building emotional equilibrium, the ability to feel emotions without being controlled by them. The craving doesn't disappear immediately, but you're learning you can experience it without acting on it. Each time you catch yourself fighting reality, honking at the train, arguing with what is, and you practice acceptance, instead, you're building cognitive equilibrium. You're training your mind to see clearly, rather than through the filter of how things should be. This is how internal stability grows, not through dramatic transformation, but through thousands of small moments where you choose practice over pattern. And here's why this matters so much right now, in this particular moment in history. The storms are relentless. You're not imagining that. The pace of life has accelerated. The demands on your attention are constant. Social media means criticism and praise are continuous and public. You can be attacked or celebrated by strangers at any moment. Work demands immediate responses. Relationships require constant maintenance. The news cycle never stops. There's always something to react to, always something demanding your emotional energy, always another storm on the horizon. If you don't have that internal anchor we've been building toward tonight, you'll be tossed around endlessly. Your peace will depend entirely on whether the most recent message you received was kind or cruel. Your sense of self will rise and fall based on the last post's engagement. You'll be exhausted, constantly vigilant, never at rest. But if you've built that internal stability, if you've practiced those equilibriums until they're strong, then you can move through all of this without losing yourself. The storms still come. The criticism and praise still arrive, but they don't determine your state anymore. You have something steady inside that nothing external can shake. The Buddha taught, you yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. This isn't just a nice sentiment. It's pointing to something practical. When you've built this internal foundation through practice, you stop looking to others to tell you whether you're okay. You know, not because you're arrogant, but because you're grounded in something real. These cultivated qualities that don't waver based on circumstances. So tonight, as you continue through these teachings, know that everything we're exploring is buildable. You're not learning about qualities you can never have. You're learning about qualities you can develop, starting from exactly where you are right now, through practice. The question isn't whether you're capable. You are. The question is whether you're willing to practice. There's an ancient Buddhist verse that goes like this: "When beings who are rough and coarse become angry with noble ones, how could those noble ones become angry in return? Though the jackal barks with arrogance, the king of beasts responds only with compassion." A jackal, small, scrappy, surviving on scraps, stands before a lion and barks. Barks loud, barks aggressively, tries to appear threatening. The lion could destroy this jackal in seconds. The lion has claws, has strength, has every physical advantage. But the lion doesn't attack, doesn't even growl back, just watches with something that looks like understanding, maybe even kindness, and walks away. Why? Because the lion understands something the jackal doesn't. This barking isn't really about the lion at all. This is the second quality we're discovering tonight: the ability to not retaliate when someone attacks you, criticizes you, tries to diminish you. Not because you can't respond, not because you're weak or passive, but because you understand something deeper about what's actually happening. Let's be honest about something first. Rough people will attack you. Not might, will. People who are carrying their own pain, their own unprocessed trauma, their own confusion about life. They're going to lash out sometimes, and you might be in the path of that lashing. This isn't pessimism. This is just reality. Maybe it's a coworker who criticizes your ideas in meetings with unnecessary harshness. Maybe it's a family member who makes cutting comments disguised as jokes. Maybe it's someone online who attacks you for having an opinion. Maybe it's a friend who betrays your trust when they're scared or insecure. These things happen. They happen to everyone. And here's what the verse is pointing to. These attacks say much more about the person doing the attacking than about you. Think about that jackal for a moment. It's not barking because the lion did something wrong. It's barking because that's what jackals do when they feel threatened or insecure. It's their nature, their pattern, their way of dealing with a world that feels dangerous. The lion hasn't provoked this. The lion is just being a lion, existing in its own power and peace. But the jackal's internal state, fear, insecurity, the need to assert itself, causes the barking. Now imagine if the lion took it personally. Imagine if the lion thought, "Why is this jackal attacking me? What did I do wrong? Maybe I'm not as powerful as I thought. Maybe I deserved this." Or imagine if the lion attacked back in rage. "How dare this small creature challenge me?" Both responses would be based on a misunderstanding of what's actually happening. The jackal is acting from its own internal confusion, not from anything the lion has done or is. Here's a question that might change how you see criticism. Who gets angry at water for being wet? Water is wet. That's its nature. Fire is hot. That's its nature. You don't rage at the ocean for making you wet when you jump in. You don't sue fire for burning you when you touch it. You understand that these elements have certain qualities, and getting angry at them for being what they are makes no sense. Some people operate from patterns that cause them to criticize harshly. Some people are emotionally burning right now with their own unprocessed anger. Some people are drowning in their own needs and will soak everyone around them. This is where they're operating from, not necessarily who they'll always be, but who they are right now. Here's where most people trap themselves. You create a mental version of people, an avatar, an image, a character in your mind of who they are and how they should behave. This mental version is based on your hopes, your needs, your ideas about relationships. And then the real person does something that doesn't match your mental version, and you suffer. Your friend who you thought was reliable doesn't show up when they promised. Your colleague who you thought was professional loses their temper. Your family member who you thought understood you makes a cruel joke at your expense. The suffering comes from the gap between your avatar and reality. You were expecting someone to give you something they genuinely don't have to give right now. This is what the lion understands. You can't ask someone for what they don't have. That coworker doesn't have gentleness to offer right now. That family member doesn't have emotional maturity to communicate directly. That friend doesn't have the follow-through you need. Does this mean you just accept bad treatment? Absolutely not. And this is critical. So listen carefully. There's a massive difference between your attitude and your action. Your attitude can be compassionate, understanding that this person is acting from their own confusion, their own pain, their own limitations. You're not taking it personally because you understand it's not really about you. You're not filled with rage because raging at water for being wet doesn't change anything. But your actions can still be firm. You can set clear boundaries. You can stop putting yourself in situations where you'll be hurt. You can limit your exposure to harmful people. You can even end relationships that are damaging. All of this can be done from compassion, not from hatred. You're not punishing the water for being wet. You're just choosing not to jump in anymore. You're not attacking the fire for being hot. You're just keeping your distance. The Buddha taught something important about this. He said that holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You're the one who gets burned. When someone treats you badly and you respond with rage, with revenge, with the need to attack back, you're not hurting them as much as you're hurting yourself. You're burning your own hand. But when you understand that their behavior comes from their own confusion, when you can see them with compassion while still protecting yourself, you're free. Free from the cycle of retaliation, free from taking everything personally, free from being controlled by how others behave. This is what it means to respond like the lion, not like another jackal. When someone criticizes you harshly, you can see that they're operating from their own pain. You can choose whether this criticism has any truth worth considering. If it does, you take it in. If it doesn't, you let it pass. But either way, you're not spending the next week plotting revenge or composing clever comebacks in your head. When someone betrays your trust, you can see that they lack the capacity for trustworthiness right now. You can adjust your expectations and behavior accordingly. You can stop giving them opportunities to hurt you without needing to hurt them back. When someone attacks you, online, in person, wherever, you can see that they're a jackal barking, not a real threat to who you are. And you can walk away with your peace intact. This is the second quality of noble beings, not retaliating when attacked. Not because they're weak, not because they're saints, but because they understand what's actually happening and they refuse to multiply suffering by adding their own anger to the mix. Think about someone in your life who treats you badly sometimes. Have you been asking them for something they don't have? Have you been expecting this person to give you support or kindness or reliability that they simply can't provide right now? What would change if you stopped expecting it? Not in a bitter way, just in a clear-eyed way. This person is who they are right now. What would it be like to accept that reality and adjust your behavior accordingly while keeping your heart free from rage? You don't have to keep getting wet just because water is wet. You can step back. You can protect yourself. You can set boundaries. You can even walk away entirely if needed. All of this can be done with compassion, understanding that they're doing the best they can with the awareness they currently have, even if that best isn't good enough for you to stay close to. This is how you remain unshaken when rough people attack. Not by becoming stone, not by pretending it doesn't hurt, but by understanding what's actually happening and refusing to multiply suffering through retaliation. The lion walks away from the barking jackal, not in fear, not in anger, but in understanding. And that understanding keeps the lion's peace intact. You mentioned to someone at dinner that you're vegetarian. You weren't making a big deal about it. You were just explaining why you're not having the meat dish. And immediately, someone at the table perks up with concern. But where do you get your protein? Aren't you vitamin deficient? I read that vegetarians have serious health problems. They're suddenly very interested in your nutrition, very worried about your well-being, asking questions with an edge of skepticism or even hostility. And the strange thing is, these same people never interrogate the person eating fast food 3 times a week about their nutrition. They're not concerned about vitamin deficiency when someone's diet consists mainly of processed snacks and soda. They save all their scrutiny for the person who's actually trying to be more conscious about what they eat. Why? There's an ancient teaching that addresses this directly. People search for faults in extraordinary people, but not in the mediocre. While people examine precious jewels carefully, who bothers to inspect a lump of coal? If someone hands you a diamond, you hold it up to the light, looking for flaws. But coal? Nobody bothers. We scrutinize what's valuable and ignore what's ordinary. We do this with people too. The person trying to improve gets examined closely, while mediocrity passes by without comment. Let's look at 3 reasons why, because understanding them will help you see what's actually happening when people criticize you for trying to improve. The first reason is threat. Someone else's good choice can feel like a judgment on your bad one. That vegetarian at the table isn't saying anything about your meat eating, but their choice creates a contrast that makes your own choice suddenly visible. So you find flaws in theirs. You focus on protein deficiency, vitamin B12, supposed health problems. You're not actually concerned about their health. You're protecting your ego from feeling inferior. Someone stays calm in a crisis, and you think they must be emotionally cold. Someone is generous, and you think they must not have a real life. Someone handles criticism gracefully, and you think they must have no self-respect. The flaw you find makes you feel better about not being like them. The second reason is the most uncomfortable. We search for flaws in good people to give ourselves permission to stay exactly as we are. You see someone living ethically, making good choices, trying to be better. Part of you feels uncomfortable because you're not living that way. You know you should probably make some changes. But change is hard. So you search for their flaws, and when you find one, you feel relieved. See, even they mess up. Even they aren't as good as they pretend. So I don't need to feel bad about my choices. I don't need to change. Their flaw gives you permission to keep your own flaws without guilt. This is why people get almost gleeful when someone ethical makes a mistake. It's not just Schadenfreude, it's permission. Their imperfection means you don't have to be perfect either. The friend who always seems to have their life together makes one bad decision, and you feel oddly satisfied. The coworker who's usually professional loses their temper once, and part of you thinks, finally, not so perfect after all. The person who talks about mindfulness gets stressed and snaps at someone, and you think, I knew it was fake. You're collecting evidence that nobody's really good, so you don't have to try to be good either. The third reason is what happens when we label someone as good. We hold them to impossible standards. Imagine someone wearing pristine white clothing. One tiny drop of coffee on their shoulder stands out dramatically. But someone in already stained work clothes, you could spill an entire cup and it would barely show. The smallest mistake from a good person becomes enormous. But someone who's never claimed to be good can make huge mistakes, and nobody blinks. This is why the usually reliable friend gets harsh criticism when they're late once, while the always late friend gets a pass. This is why you might face more scrutiny for trying to improve than you did when you weren't trying at all. Now here's what this means for you. The more you develop inner stability, the more scrutiny you'll face. People will look for your flaws. They'll test your patience to see if it's real. They'll watch for when you slip and point it out with satisfaction. Not everyone will do this, but some will, and understanding why helps you not take it personally. They're not really looking at you. They're looking at the contrast between who you're becoming and who they're staying. They're searching for the flaw that gives them permission to stay comfortable with their own choices. There's a poison in communities that the Buddha warned about: gossip about other people's faults. This poison spreads easily because it feels good. It makes us feel superior. It bonds us with others who are also criticizing. It distracts us from looking at our own issues. But it destroys communities. It creates an atmosphere where nobody feels safe to grow or change because they know they'll be scrutinized for it. It keeps everyone trapped at the lowest level because standing out invites attack. The Buddha taught that it's easy to see others' faults. We throw them up in the air, like chaff in the wind, making them visible to everyone. But our own faults, those we hide carefully. When you find yourself examining someone else's choices, searching for flaws in their goodness, pause and ask, what am I avoiding looking at in myself? What permission am I trying to give myself by finding their imperfections? And when others do this to you, when they scrutinize your choices, search for flaws in what you're trying to do. Remember what's actually happening. It's not about you. It's about their need for permission to stay as they are. Think about when you've criticized someone for trying to be better. Someone at work taking initiative and you thinking they're showing off. Someone posting about their progress and you rolling your eyes. Someone making a healthy choice and you finding reasons why it's not really that healthy. Were you looking for the flaw that would give you permission to stay exactly as you are? And think about when you've held back from doing something good because you knew people would scrutinize it. You knew that being ordinary is safer than standing out. What would it be like to do the good thing anyway? To become someone worth examining, even knowing people will look for flaws? This is part of becoming unshakable, being willing to be scrutinized and remaining steady anyway. Not because you're perfect, but because you understand what's happening and refuse to let others' need to find flaws pull you back down. Now let's look at why criticism can feel so crushing. When someone criticizes you, what do you actually hear? Not the words they say, but what you hear inside your own head. Most of the time, you hear identity, not action. You hear, you are, instead of, you did. Someone says, "That report was sloppy." You hear, "You are sloppy." Someone says, "You made a mistake." You hear, "You are a mistake." Someone says, "That wasn't your best work." You hear, "You are not good enough." The criticism was about an action, a specific thing you did, in one moment. But you heard it as a judgment about your identity, about who you are permanently. This shift from action to identity is why criticism feels so crushing. If someone's critique is about what you did, you can change it next time. You can learn and improve. But if you've translated it into identity, if "that was sloppy" becomes "you are sloppy," then there's no way out. You're trapped. The criticism becomes permanent instead of temporary feedback. And here's what makes this complicated. We do this shift ourselves. The other person might be giving reasonable feedback about a specific action, but we translate it into identity the moment we hear it. Then we suffer from that translation, not from what they actually said. This happens because of how empty or full you are inside. If you're empty, if you don't have a solid sense of who you are, if your self-worth is shaky, if you're constantly looking to others to tell you if you're okay, then other people's words fill you up completely. One criticism, and you're full of shame. One piece of praise, and you're full of pride. But it drains out quickly, because there's nothing solid inside. But if you have a genuine, grounded sense of yourself, not arrogance, not pretending to be perfect, just clear understanding of who you are, including both strengths and limitations, then other people's words don't fill you up. Criticism comes, and you can look at it objectively. Is this about what I did or who I am? Is there truth here worth learning from? And you can take in what's useful without being destroyed. Praise comes, and you can receive it with simple gratitude, without needing more, without building your whole sense of self around it. The Buddha taught, you yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. This isn't about self-centeredness. It's about having a solid, loving relationship with yourself so that other people's opinions don't determine your worth. When criticism comes, and it will, try this. Ask yourself, am I hearing identity or action? Am I hearing you are or you did? Can I separate what I did in a specific moment from who I am as a person? This one shift, keeping action and identity separate, might be the most important thing you learn tonight. Because when you know who you are, when you have genuine self-knowledge and self-compassion, other people's words about what you did can't touch who you are. They can only touch who you are if you let them. If you translate their words from action to identity, if you take temporary feedback and turn it into permanent judgment. But you don't have to do that translation anymore. You can hear what was actually said, Consider whether it's useful and let it stop there, at the level of action, not identity. It's Monday morning. You open your email and there it is. A message from your manager, a colleague, maybe a client. Just a few lines. But those lines say something critical about your work, about your judgment, about a decision you made. Your stomach drops. Your heart speeds up. You read it again, hoping you misunderstood. But no, it says what you thought it said. And just like that, your whole week changes. You can't focus on anything else. You read the email 10 more times, analyzing every word. You compose responses in your head, some defensive, some apologetic, some angry. You don't send any of them, but you can't stop writing them mentally. You replay the situation, seeing all the ways you could have done it differently. Tuesday comes and you're still thinking about it. Wednesday, and it's still there, a weight in your chest. By Friday, you've barely accomplished anything because this one email has consumed your mental energy. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe the email is praise. Your manager says your work was excellent, exactly what they needed. You feel amazing for about 2 hours. Then the feeling starts to fade. By afternoon, you're already wondering, will they think the next thing I do is as good? What if I can't maintain this level? By the next day, that praise feels like it happened years ago, and you're already hungry for the next validation. This is what it means to live as a hostage to words. Criticism destroys you. Praise inflates you, briefly, then leaves you empty, and neither one gives you any lasting peace. This brings us to the third quality of people who remain unshaken. Praise doesn't seduce them, criticism doesn't crush them, and they stay rooted in something real, regardless of what others say. Let's look at why we get trapped in this cycle. In Buddhist teaching, there's something called the 8 worldly dharmas, 8 things that most people spend their entire lives chasing or avoiding. They come in 4 pairs. The first pair is praise and criticism. We desperately want praise and desperately fear criticism. We adjust our behavior, our words, our choices to maximize praise and minimize criticism. The second pair is gain and loss, acquiring things and losing things. Money, possessions, status, titles, achievements. We spend enormous energy trying to gain more and avoid losing what we have. The third pair is fame and obscurity, being noticed versus being ignored. Not fame in the celebrity sense necessarily, but being important, being recognized, being someone who matters in your workplace, your community, your social circle. The fourth pair is pleasure and pain, seeking what feels good and avoiding what feels bad. Not just physical pleasure and pain, but emotional comfort and discomfort. The pleasant conversation versus the difficult one, the easy path versus the challenging one. Now here's what makes these 8 things so powerful and so problematic. They work. Sort of temporarily. Praise does feel good. Gaining something you wanted does bring satisfaction. Being recognized does create a sense of significance. So your mind learns, this is how I get happy. Chase these things. Build your life around pursuing praise, gain, fame, and pleasure while avoiding their opposites. But there's a massive problem with this strategy. None of these things last, and none of them are under your control. Think of it like a casino. You walk in, and sometimes you win. The praise comes. The promotion happens. People notice you. You feel good. That win feels amazing, so you think, this is working. But the house always wins in the long run. Eventually, criticism will come. Loss will happen. You'll be overlooked. Pain will arrive. And when it does, you crash. The problem isn't that these things exist. The problem is confusing them with genuine well-being. Pleasure is not the same as peace. Praise is not the same as self-worth. Gain is not the same as security. Fame is not the same as meaning. But we confuse them constantly because they give us a hit, a temporary spike of good feeling that we mistake for actual happiness. It's like eating candy and thinking you've had a nutritious meal. It tastes good, gives you quick energy, but doesn't actually nourish you. And when it wears off, you're hungrier than before. This is why that Monday morning email can ruin your whole week. You've built your sense of self on other people's opinions. When the opinion is positive, you feel solid, but only until the next opinion arrives. When the opinion is negative, everything crumbles because there's nothing underneath holding you up. The Buddha taught something crucial about this. He said that suffering comes from tanha, this desperate clinging to experiences we want and desperate pushing away of experiences we don't want. We crave praise and push away criticism. We crave gain and push away loss. This constant craving and aversion creates endless suffering because we're trying to control what can't be controlled. But here's what's hopeful. You can build your life on something that doesn't move, that doesn't depend on whether Monday's email is praise or criticism. Remember those 4 equilibriums? Attentional, ethical, emotional, cognitive. These are what you root yourself in instead of the 8 worldly dharmas. When you can direct your attention, when you act from integrity, regardless of who's watching, when you can experience emotions without being controlled by them, when you see reality clearly, these qualities don't fluctuate based on what email arrives Monday morning. They're yours. They're stable. They're under your influence, even if not completely under your control. This is what it means to stay rooted in your practice rather than in results. Your practice, your daily choices to cultivate these equilibriums, to develop genuine self-knowledge, to act from integrity, this is the solid ground beneath your feet. Results fluctuate. Sometimes people praise you, sometimes they criticize you. but your practice continues regardless. When that email arrives Monday morning, whether it's criticism or praise, you can receive it without being destroyed or inflated by it, because your sense of who you are doesn't live in that email. It lives in the qualities you've been cultivating, the ability to pause, to see clearly, to respond rather than react, to stay grounded in what's real. The Buddha said, "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without." This isn't poetry. It's practical instruction. Stop betting everything on the casino of praise and criticism, gain and loss. You can't win that game long term. Build something inside that doesn't require winning. Genuine self-knowledge, genuine compassion, genuine clarity about what actually matters. Think about an email, a text, a comment that's still living in your mind. Maybe it was weeks ago, months ago, maybe even years ago. Someone said something critical, or someone praised you and then took it away, or someone ignored you when you needed to be seen, and you're still carrying it. That's not about the other person anymore. That's about where you're placing your foundation. That's about trying to get your sense of worth from something outside yourself that you can't control. What would it be like to put it down? Not to pretend it didn't hurt, but simply to stop letting those words determine who you are today. What would it be like to build your foundation somewhere else, on the qualities you're developing, the practices you're maintaining, the understanding you're cultivating? That's what we're building toward tonight. Not invulnerability to words, but freedom from being held hostage by them. Picture someone dressed in pristine white clothing from head to toe. White shirt, white pants, white shoes, everything perfectly clean, bright, spotless. They're sitting at a cafe having coffee. One tiny drop, barely noticeable, maybe the size of a pencil eraser, falls on their shoulder. Everyone sees it immediately. That single brown spot on all that white stands out like a spotlight's on it. The person becomes acutely aware of it, self-conscious, maybe even embarrassed. Now, picture a mechanic in their work clothes, dark pants, already stained with oil, grease, dirt, from working under cars all week. Someone spills an entire cup of coffee on them. Does anyone notice? Barely. The mechanic probably doesn't even care. Same substance, coffee, but completely different impact based on what it lands on. We do this exact thing with people, and it creates a particular kind of suffering that most of us carry without realizing it. When you label someone as good, or when you get labeled this way yourself, you've just dressed them in white clothing. Now, every small mistake becomes enormous. The friend who's usually reliable is late once, and it feels like a betrayal. The colleague who's usually professional loses their temper once, and people are shocked. The person who talks about living mindfully gets stressed and snaps at someone, and others think, See, it was all fake. But the person who's never claimed to be good, they can make huge mistakes, and nobody's surprised. More stains don't change anything. This creates a strange trap. The better you try to be, the more exhausting it becomes, because the standard keeps rising. You become afraid of being human, afraid of having a bad day, afraid of the inevitable moment when you're not at your best, because you know that one drop of coffee will be visible from across the room. And here's what makes this even more complicated. Often, you're the one doing this to yourself. Maybe nobody else is holding you to these impossible standards. But you've decided you should be good. You should be calm. You should be patient. You've dressed yourself in white, and now you're terrified of any spot appearing. You handle criticism well 99 times, but the one time you get defensive, you're devastated with yourself. You stay calm through 99 stressful situations, but the one time you lose it, you think, I'm a fraud. I'm not actually calm. I've been pretending. You're judging yourself by the drop of coffee, not by the 99 times there was no drop. You're focusing on the spot and ignoring all the white that's still clean. This is exhausting. This is why people sometimes give up on trying to be better, not because being better is hard, but because the standard they're holding themselves to is inhuman. Nobody can be perfectly calm, perfectly patient, perfectly composed all the time. But we think we should be able to. And when we can't, we crash. And then there's what happens when others put you on a pedestal. Maybe you've been reliable, kind, patient, strong through difficult times. People start seeing you as the calm one, the stable one, the one who has it together. And at first, this might feel good. It's nice to be seen as capable. But then you realize you can't have a bad day anymore. You can't admit when you're struggling because people need you to be strong. You can't show frustration or anxiety or weakness because that's not who you're supposed to be. You've been dressed in white by others' perception, and now you're trapped maintaining that image even when you just want to be human. The pedestal becomes a prison. You're isolated up there, trying to maintain an image of perfection that you never claimed you had in the first place. This relates directly to how we handle praise and criticism. When people praise you for being calm, wise, patient, kind, they're dressing you in white. And if you believe that praise, if you start identifying with being the calm one or the wise one, you've just put yourself in the white suit. Now any moment you're not calm becomes a spot that stands out dramatically. And when criticism comes, when someone points out that one drop of coffee, it hits harder because of the contrast. You're experiencing the gap between who you've been presented as and the human reality of who you actually are. So, what's the way out of this trap? First, stop wearing white. Stop holding yourself to standards of perfection that no human can maintain. Stop believing that being good means being perfect, that trying to improve means never making mistakes, that handling criticism well means never being hurt by it. You can be someone who generally stays calm and still have moments when you lose it. You can be someone who tries to be kind and still have moments when you're sharp or impatient. These moments don't erase all the other moments. They don't make you a fraud. They make you human. The Buddha never taught perfection. He taught practice, continuous, ongoing practice of returning to wisdom, to compassion, to clarity after you've lost them. Not staying in them constantly without ever falling out, but returning to them each time you do fall out. Good enough is actually good enough. Not as a cop-out, but as a realistic understanding of what it means to be human. You're good enough when you're doing your best with the awareness you have in this moment. You're good enough when you're trying to grow while accepting where you currently are. This might sound like lowering your standards, but it's actually the opposite. It's having accurate standards instead of impossible ones. It's understanding that real growth happens in the space between perfection and giving up, in the middle ground, where you're trying, failing sometimes, learning and trying again. And here's what's beautiful about releasing the need to wear white. Criticism doesn't hit as hard anymore. When someone points out a flaw or a mistake, you're not devastated because you weren't pretending to be flawless in the first place. You can look at it honestly. Yes, that's true. I did mess up there. What can I learn from this? And praise doesn't seduce you as much either. When someone says you're calm, or wise, or kind, you can receive it with gratitude without building your whole identity around it. You know you're sometimes calm and sometimes not, sometimes wise and sometimes foolish. The praise is nice, but it doesn't define you because you're not wearing white that must stay spotless. Healthy self-worth isn't thinking you're perfect. It's knowing you're imperfect and being okay with that. It's understanding that your value as a person doesn't depend on maintaining a spotless image. The Buddha taught, you can search throughout the entire universe for someone more deserving of your love and affection than you are yourself, and that person is not to be found anywhere. You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. This includes loving and accepting the parts of you that aren't perfect, the moments when you fall short of your own ideals, the days when you're wearing stained overalls instead of spotless white. Think about this. Where in your life are you wearing white when you could wear blue, or grey, or even the mechanic's comfortable overalls? Where are you holding yourself to standards that make every small mistake feel like a disaster? Where are you so afraid of the coffee drops that you've stopped living freely, stopped being fully human? What would it be like to change clothes? To show up as someone who's trying their best and sometimes failing, someone who's generally kind but has bad days? Not as lowering your standards, but as having realistic ones. This is how you begin to handle both criticism and praise with more freedom, by releasing the exhausting need to be perfect and accepting the relief of being human. Now let's look at what actually supports this shift from impossible standards to realistic practice. Because understanding is helpful, but it's not enough on its own. You need actual practices that build the internal stability we've been talking about all night. In Buddhist teaching, everything we've discussed, staying calm when criticized, not being seduced by praise, remaining steady regardless of circumstances, all of this is supported by 3 core practices called the 3 higher trainings. The first training is ethics. Not ethics as rigid rules or moral superiority, but ethics as choosing actions that reduce harm and increase well-being for yourself and others. When you train in ethics, you're developing integrity, the quality of acting from principles rather than just from fear or performance. In practical terms, this means noticing when you're about to speak or act and pausing to ask, will this cause harm or reduce it? Not in some dramatic way, just in small, daily choices. The words you choose, the actions you take, the way you treat yourself and others. When you train in ethics consistently, something shifts inside. You develop an internal compass that doesn't need external validation to know whether you're on track. Criticism from others hurts less because you know whether you acted with integrity. Praise from others means less because your sense of doing right doesn't depend on applause. The second training is meditation, but not meditation as sitting quietly, trying to empty your mind. Meditation as training your attention, learning to direct your mind deliberately rather than being pulled around by every thought and emotion that arises. In practical terms, this means noticing when your mind is replaying that critical email for the 15th time and gently bringing it back to what's actually happening right now. It means feeling anger or anxiety without immediately acting on those feelings, giving yourself space to respond wisely instead of reacting automatically. When you train in meditation consistently, you develop the ability to pause. That pause is where freedom lives, the gap between stimulus and response, where you can choose how to act instead of being controlled by habit. The third training is wisdom, seeing reality clearly without the distortion of your fears, desires, and fixed beliefs. In practical terms, this means understanding impermanence, that praise and criticism both pass, that no state lasts forever, that clinging to the good or pushing away the bad creates suffering. It means understanding that you're not a fixed, permanent self that can be defined by one email or one moment or one person's opinion. It means seeing the difference between you did this and you are this. When you train in wisdom consistently, you stop taking things so personally because you understand what's actually happening beneath the surface of events. These 3 trainings work together. Ethics gives you the foundation of living with integrity. Meditation gives you the ability to stay present, and not be hijacked by emotions. Wisdom gives you clear seeing that cuts through confusion. Together, they build something solid inside you that external circumstances can't shake. This is your spiritual anchor, not believing the right things or having the right philosophy, but actually training your mind and heart and actions in these three areas. When the storm of criticism comes, this anchor keeps you from being swept away. When the seductive pull of praise arrives, this anchor keeps you from being dragged after it desperately. The Buddha said, "There is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way." He meant that these trainings aren't something you do to eventually arrive at peace. The practice itself is the peace. Training in ethics, training in attention, training in clear seeing. This is what it means to be unshakable right now, even while you're still imperfect and still learning. The question isn't whether you'll be criticized or praised tomorrow. The question is whether you're building these qualities today that let you remain yourself regardless of what comes. There's an ancient teaching that says, wealth obtained through wrong means or through force is not true wealth. Even dogs and cats, though their bellies are full, are examples of those who have forgotten shame. This teaching is harsh by our modern standards, and it needs some unpacking. In ancient times, street dogs and cats had to scavenge, steal food, fight other animals for scraps. The teaching wasn't condemning the animals themselves. They were doing what they needed to survive. The point was about humans who acquire things through harm, through stealing, through taking advantage of others. They might have full bellies, they might have wealth, but they've lost something essential: integrity. Let's translate this into something more relatable for today. Imagine someone who builds their success by lying to clients, by taking credit for others' work, by cutting corners in ways that hurt people. Maybe they make a lot of money. Maybe they get the promotion. From the outside, they look successful. But here's what the teaching is pointing to. That wealth is unstable. It's built on a foundation of harm, and foundations of harm don't hold. Not because the universe is morally judging them and will punish them, but because of simple cause and effect, what we call karma in Buddhist teaching. Karma isn't cosmic justice or divine punishment. It's just the law of cause and effect playing out in human lives. When you build something through harm, through lying, stealing, manipulating, betraying trust, you create consequences that will eventually come back to affect you. The person who lies to clients will eventually be caught, or will develop a reputation that makes people wary. The person who takes credit for others' work will eventually lose the trust and cooperation of colleagues. The person who cuts corners will eventually face the consequences, lawsuits, failures, damage to their reputation. The wealth might be real in the moment, but it doesn't last because it wasn't built on something solid. Now here's where this gets interesting, and where it connects to everything we've been exploring about staying unshaken. Even the most selfish person in the world, if they truly understood how karma works, would choose to be generous and ethical. Not because they've suddenly become good or compassionate, but because it's the most intelligent form of self-interest. Think about it this way. Imagine someone who's completely selfish. They only care about their own well-being, their own success. Now imagine they truly understand that every action creates consequences that will come back to affect their own life. That harming others will eventually harm them. That helping others will eventually benefit them. That building trust creates opportunities, while breaking trust closes doors. If they really understood this, they would choose generosity, honesty, kindness, not out of morality, but out of pure self-interest. They would treat people well because it's the smartest way to create a good life for themselves. This is what the teaching means about true wealth versus false wealth. True wealth, the kind that lasts, that's stable, comes from ethical action. False wealth, the kind that looks good but doesn't last, comes from harmful action. But there's a catch. Karma needs time to work. When you lie to someone and it gets you what you want immediately, it looks like it worked. When you betray someone's trust and face no immediate consequences, it looks like you got away with it. But karma isn't instant. The consequences unfold over time, sometimes days, sometimes months, sometimes years. The person you lied to might not catch you today, but the habit of lying you're building will catch up with you eventually. All karma needs is time, and time is the one thing everyone gets. And here's something important about karma that people often misunderstand. It's not just about external consequences. It's also about what you're building inside yourself. Every time you lie, you're training your mind in lying. Every time you act from greed, you're strengthening greed. Every time you harm someone, you're making it easier to harm someone next time. You're shaping who you're becoming. You're building patterns that will be harder to break later. And the opposite is equally true. Every time you act with integrity, you're training your mind in integrity. Every time you choose generosity over greed, you're weakening greed and strengthening generosity. This is the real wealth the teaching is pointing to, not just external success, but the internal qualities you're cultivating. Someone who's built their life on integrity has something that can't be taken away. They have a stable foundation that no external circumstance can shake. This connects directly to handling criticism and praise. When you've built your life on genuine ethical action, criticism hurts less because you have something solid to stand on. You're not dependent on others' approval because you have your own internal compass. And when praise comes, it doesn't seduce you as much because you know the difference between genuine accomplishment and cheap wins. You're not desperate for validation because you have something real inside yourself. Now here's what makes all of this practical, rather than just philosophical. You need to make these decisions now, while you're clear, so they protect you later when you're confused. Right now, as you're listening to this, you probably have some clarity about who you want to be. You know lying is harmful. You know betraying trust creates problems. You have clarity right now about your values, about what matters, about the kind of life you want to build. But in 2 weeks or 2 months, you might not have that clarity. You might be stressed, tired, desperate, afraid. Someone might offer you a shortcut that looks really tempting. You might face a situation where lying seems like it would solve everything. In those moments of confusion, what protects you? The contract you make with yourself right now, while you're clear. This is what ethical training actually is. Not forcing yourself to be good, but making agreements with yourself about how you'll act, and then keeping those agreements even when it's hard. You decide now, I will not lie, even when lying would be convenient. I will not betray trust, even when I'm angry or hurt. I will not build my success on harming others, even when that path looks faster. These aren't abstract moral principles. They're agreements you make with yourself about who you're committed to being. And then, when the moment comes, when you're tired and the lie would be so easy, when your hurt and betrayal feels justified, when the shortcut that harms others is right there in front of you, that agreement protects you. It reminds you of who you decided to be when you were thinking clearly. The Buddha taught, an insincere and evil friend is more to be feared than a wild beast. A wild beast may wound your body, but an evil friend will wound your mind. But the evil friend he was most concerned about is the one inside yourself, the voice that says, just this once, nobody will know. It's not that bad. The rules don't apply in this situation. The contract you make with yourself when you're clear is protection against that voice when you're confused. Think about this. What contract have you made with yourself? What have you decided about how you'll act? About what you will and won't do? About the kind of person you're committed to being? Is it clear enough that it will protect you when clarity is hard to find? Or have you been living without a contract, making it up as you go along, deciding in each moment based on what's convenient? Because here's the truth. If you don't decide who you are now, circumstances will decide for you later. If you don't make your contract with yourself in clarity, you'll be forced to make decisions in confusion. And decisions made in confusion rarely serve your actual well-being. The smartest kind of selfishness is ethical behavior. The truest kind of wealth is integrity. The most stable foundation you can build is one of actions that reduce harm and increase well-being for yourself and for others. Not because you're trying to be a saint, but because you understand how karma works and you want a life that actually works. Tonight, Before you sleep, make your contract. Decide who you are and how you'll act. Not perfectly, just clearly. And then let that decision protect you tomorrow and the day after, and in all the moments when clarity is harder to find. Imagine you're on a long road trip, driving across open countryside, where you can see for miles in every direction. The sky is dramatic, patches of blue, areas of dark clouds, shafts of sunlight breaking through in places. And ahead of you, maybe 5 or 10 miles away, you can see a rainstorm. Not a massive weather system covering everything, but a compact storm, the kind where you can see exactly where it's raining and exactly where it's not. Clear boundaries, moving steadily across the land. As you drive, you can see 3 different towns, experiencing 3 completely different realities at the same exact moment. In the town to your left, the sun is shining. People are outside going about their day, maybe setting up for an outdoor event, hanging laundry, working in their gardens. They have no idea what's coming in 15 minutes. From where they stand, it's a beautiful day. They're making plans based on sunshine continuing. In the town straight ahead, directly under the storm, everything is different. Rain is pouring down. Streets are flooding. People are rushing inside, grabbing things they left outside, dealing with the chaos of sudden bad weather. That outdoor event they were planning is ruined. The laundry is soaked. Everything feels like disaster. From where they stand, the whole day is wrecked, and who knows when it will clear up. And in the town to your right, people are emerging from their houses. The storm has just passed. They're assessing the damage, starting to clean up, checking if everyone's okay. Water is still dripping from roof edges, but the sky above them is already clearing. The worst is over. From where they stand, they're in recovery mode, dealing with the aftermath. 3 towns, 3 completely different experiences, 3 different emotional states: anticipation, crisis, recovery. And they're all happening simultaneously. But here's what you can see from your position on the road that none of them can see from inside their moment. The storm is moving. It's just weather passing through. The town that's sunny now will be in the storm soon. The town that's drowning will be in sunshine within the hour. The town that's recovering will have clear skies by afternoon. The storm itself doesn't care about any of them. It's not punishing the middle town or blessing the ones on either side. It's just a weather pattern doing what weather patterns do, moving across the landscape in its own rhythm. This is exactly what our lives look like when you zoom out far enough. Right now, you might be in the sunny part. Things are going well. You're getting praised at work. Your relationships are good. You feel capable and successful. You're making plans based on this continuing. You might even think you've figured something out, that you've finally gotten life to work the way you want it to. Or maybe you're in the storm right now. Criticism is pouring down. Something important has fallen apart. You feel like you're failing. Everything that could go wrong is going wrong. From inside the storm, it feels permanent. You can't remember what sunshine felt like, and you can't imagine it ever coming back. Or maybe you're in that third space, recovering from something difficult, starting to see light again, but still dealing with the aftermath of what just happened. Not in crisis anymore, but not okay yet either. Wherever you are right now, here's what's true. The storm is moving. It always is. This is what the Buddhist teachings mean by samsara, not just suffering, but the cyclical nature of unenlightened existence. Up and down, success and failure, praise and criticism, gain and loss, over and over in endless cycles. You get the promotion, you lose the job, you find love, you experience heartbreak, you feel confident, you feel inadequate. Round and round, like being on a wheel that never stops turning. And when you're inside one moment of the cycle, especially if you're in the storm, it feels like everything. It feels permanent. It feels like this is your life now, and it will always be this way. But if you could see from that elevated perspective, the way you could from the road looking at all three towns, you'd see something different. You'd see the pattern. You'd see that this moment, this criticism, this praise, this success, this failure is just one part of an ongoing cycle. The storm that's on you now will pass. The sunshine you're enjoying now will eventually give way to clouds. Nothing stays. And here's what fuels this whole cycle, what keeps it turning. 3 things: ignorance, fear, and desire. Ignorance means not seeing the cycle itself. When you're in sunshine, you think it will last forever, and you're shocked when the storm comes. When you're in the storm, you think you'll never escape it, and you're surprised when it passes. You don't see the pattern, so you're constantly caught off guard by changes you could have anticipated. Fear means desperately trying to avoid the storm. You see those dark clouds on the horizon, and you panic. You try to control everything, manipulate circumstances, do whatever it takes to stay in the sunshine. But the storm comes anyway, because storms are part of weather, and suffering is part of life. Desire means desperately grasping at the sunshine. When things are good, you cling to them, terrified they'll end. You try to freeze this moment, to make it permanent, to guarantee it will never change. But it does change, because everything changes, and your grasping just makes the inevitable loss hurt more. These 3, ignorance, fear, desire, keep the wheel turning. They keep you trapped in reacting to wherever you are in the cycle, rather than understanding the cycle itself. So what's the way out? Or more accurately, what's the way to stop being tossed around by the cycle, even though the cycle continues? It's not about making the storm stop coming. You can't control that. It's not about staying in permanent sunshine. That's impossible. It's about internal development that remains constant regardless of where you are in the external cycle. Think about those 4 equilibriums we talked about earlier: attentional, ethical, emotional, cognitive. These don't depend on whether you're currently in sunshine or storm. You can train your attention, act with integrity, manage your emotions, and see clearly whether you're being praised or criticized, whether you're succeeding or failing, whether you're in the good part of the cycle or the difficult part. This is what the teaching means about growth mattering, regardless of your external position. You can be at the peak of success and still work on developing these inner qualities. You can be in the valley of failure and still work on developing these inner qualities. You can be in the middle, neither particularly up nor particularly down, and still work on developing these inner qualities. The solution is always the same. Develop internally. Build something inside yourself that doesn't depend on which part of the cycle you're currently experiencing. When you're in the storm, when criticism is pouring down, when everything feels like it's falling apart, you can practice staying grounded in those inner qualities rather than being swept away by circumstances. When you're in the sunshine, when praise is abundant, when everything's going your way, you can practice not building your identity on conditions that will inevitably change. The Buddha taught, all conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. This doesn't mean becoming pessimistic or refusing to enjoy good things. It means seeing the cycle clearly enough that you stop being surprised by it, stop being controlled by it, stop placing all your happiness on one part of it, continuing forever. The broader view brings peace, not because your circumstances get easier, not because the storms stop coming, but because you understand what's actually happening. You see the pattern. You see that this moment, whatever it is part of a larger cycle that will continue moving. And that understanding allows you to respond differently. When criticism comes, you can remember, this is the storm passing through, not a permanent condition. When praise comes, you can remember, this is sunshine, beautiful, but temporary, not something to build my entire sense of self upon. When success comes, you can enjoy it without grasping. When failure comes, you can learn from it without being destroyed. Think about where you are right now in your cycle. Are you in sunshine, making plans as if it will last forever? Are you in the storm, feeling like you'll never escape? Are you in recovery, dealing with what just happened? And now ask yourself, can you see the storm moving, or are you only seeing your current weather? Can you zoom out far enough to see the pattern, to understand that this moment is just one part of an ongoing cycle? This shift in perspective, from being trapped in the moment to seeing the cycle, is what begins to free you from being controlled by praise and criticism, by success and failure, by all the ups and downs that will continue happening as long as you're alive. The storm keeps moving. It always does. The question is whether you'll be tossed around by it, or whether you'll develop something inside yourself that remains steady, regardless of what weather is currently passing through. We've traveled through many teachings tonight, and now it's time to bring them all together into something you can actually use. Everything we've explored, the speed cameras, the train barriers, the guitar practice, the jackal and lion, the jewel inspections, the Monday morning emails, the white suits, the understanding of karma, the moving storms. All of it has been pointing toward three qualities that make some people unshakable, while others get tossed around by every word someone says. These aren't mysterious spiritual powers. They're practical qualities you can develop, starting tonight. The first quality is this: praise doesn't seduce you anymore. Not that you become cold or ungrateful, not that compliments don't feel nice, but they don't hook you, don't pull you around, don't become something you desperately need more of. Think about what seduction actually means: being led away from yourself, being pulled by something outside yourself into behavior you wouldn't choose if you were thinking clearly. When praise seduces you, you start adjusting your actions to get more of it. You stop doing what matters and start doing what gets noticed. You become a performer rather than a person, constantly aware of your audience, constantly hoping for applause. This creates an addiction cycle as real as any chemical dependency. The praise hits, and you feel amazing, validated, seen, worthy. Then it fades, and you feel empty again, craving the next hit. So you seek it out, do whatever worked last time, try to recreate the conditions that brought praise before. But it never satisfies for long. The dose you needed yesterday doesn't work today. You need more. Need it more often. Need it from more people. Freedom comes when you can receive praise with simple gratitude. Thank you. That's kind of you to say. And then let it go. It doesn't fill you up because you're already full. It doesn't define you because you know who you are, independent of what anyone says. You can appreciate it without needing it, enjoy it without being controlled by it. The second quality is this: criticism doesn't crush you anymore. Again, not that criticism doesn't sting sometimes, not that you become robotic or indifferent, but the criticism doesn't knock you down for days, doesn't spiral into self-hatred, doesn't make you question your entire worth as a person. Remember what we learned about the action versus identity distinction. This is where it becomes practical. When criticism comes, you can hear it as feedback about something you did in a specific situation, rather than as judgment about who you are permanently. Someone says your report was sloppy, and instead of hearing, "You are sloppy," you hear, "This specific report had issues. Can you fix it?" Yes. Is there something to learn? Maybe. Does this define your identity? No. This protection comes from self-knowledge, not arrogance. You're not pretending to be perfect or above criticism, but genuine understanding of who you are, including both strengths and limitations. When you know yourself clearly, other people's opinions, even harsh ones, can't destroy that knowledge. They can add information, they can point out blind spots, but they can't erase what you've built through years of honest self-examination. You're wearing armor, but not the defensive kind that keeps everything out. You're wearing the armor of self-knowledge that lets useful criticism in, while keeping destructive attacks from reaching your core. The third quality is this: you remain rooted in your virtues. This is the one that holds everything else together. When praise and criticism are both passing through you without controlling you, what are you actually standing on? What's the ground beneath your feet? The original teaching says, remaining correctly in your virtues, and that phrase needs unpacking because it doesn't mean what you might think. This isn't about moral superiority or rigid rules or judging yourself and others. It means staying aligned with those qualities you've been cultivating, those 4 equilibriums, those 3 higher trainings, that internal development that doesn't depend on external circumstances. Remember ethics, meditation, and wisdom. These are your virtues in the Buddhist sense. Not rules you follow to be good, but qualities you develop to be free. When you train in ethical conduct, when you train your attention through meditation, when you train in seeing clearly through wisdom, these practices become your anchor. And here's what's remarkable. When you're rooted in these practices, you control 3 crucial things. You control your conduct, how you act, regardless of how you feel. You control your mind, where your attention goes, and how you relate to your thoughts and emotions. You control your perception, how clearly you see reality without the distortion of fear and desire. When you have these 3 under your influence, not perfect control, but genuine influence, you become unshakable. Not because nothing difficult happens, but because you have something solid to stand on that external circumstances can't take away. So what does this look like tomorrow morning? How do these 3 qualities actually work in real life? When criticism arrives, and it will arrive, you pause. Just for a moment. You take 1 breath before reacting. In that pause, you remember the jackal barking at the lion. You remember that this person's words say more about them than about you. You remember to separate action from identity, to ask whether there's useful feedback here without letting it become a verdict on your worth. And then you respond, or you don't. But either way, you're not carried away by it. When praise arrives, and it will arrive, you receive it. You say thank you. You let yourself feel glad that someone appreciated your work. But you don't cling to it. Don't replay it obsessively. Don't start adjusting your entire life to get more of it. You let it be what it is, a nice moment that will pass like all moments pass, and you stay rooted in your practice rather than in the results your practice produces. This is the shift from living for outcomes to living from your practice. Outcomes fluctuate. Sometimes you're praised, sometimes criticized, sometimes ignored. But your practice can remain steady. You can continue training your attention, acting with integrity, seeing clearly, regardless of whether today brought sunshine or storm. Which quality will you practice first? Maybe you need to work on not being seduced by praise, because you notice how desperately you seek validation. Maybe you need to work on not being crushed by criticism because one harsh word can ruin your week. Maybe you need to work on staying rooted in your practice because you've been floating around without an anchor, tossed by every wave. Start with one. Just one quality, practiced imperfectly, is enough to begin. Now there's one final piece we need to address before we close tonight, because there's a trap people often fall into when they start developing these qualities. They confuse inner peace with outer passivity. They think that remaining unshaken means never taking action, never setting boundaries, never saying no to harmful behavior. This is wrong. And it's dangerous. In Buddhist teaching, especially in the Bodhisattva path, the path of someone committed to reducing suffering for all beings, the greatest sin is indifference. Not anger, not fear, not even hatred. Indifference. The cold turning away from suffering, the refusal to engage, the comfortable numbness that lets harm continue because confronting it would be uncomfortable. Compassion is not passivity. Setting boundaries is not the opposite of kindness. Taking firm action against harmful behavior is not betraying your inner peace. Remember when we talked about the jackal and the lion? The lion doesn't retaliate with rage, doesn't attack the jackal in anger. But the lion also doesn't let the jackal take over its territory. The lion walks away if appropriate, or the lion stops the threat if necessary, all while maintaining that inner stability we've been building toward. Your attitude can be compassionate, understanding that people act from their own confusion and pain, but your actions can still be firm. You can end relationships that are harmful. You can report behavior that crosses ethical lines. You can say no clearly and repeatedly to people who keep asking for what you cannot give. You can protect yourself and others from harm. All of this can be done from compassion, not from hatred. The difference is internal. You're not burning with rage while you set the boundary. You're not seeking revenge while you take protective action. You're not attacking the person while you stop the harmful behavior. You're doing what needs to be done from a place of clarity rather than from a place of emotional reactivity. Action and peace coexist. You can be utterly calm inside while being completely firm in your actions. You can have compassion for why someone behaves harmfully while still protecting yourself from that harm. You can understand their pain while refusing to let their pain become your pain. The Buddha taught, hatred is never appeased by hatred in this world. By non-hatred alone is hatred appeased. This is an eternal law. But non-hatred doesn't mean non-action. It means acting from wisdom rather than from rage, from compassion rather than from vindictiveness, from clarity rather than from confusion. So as you develop these three qualities, as praise stops seducing you, as criticism stops crushing you, as you remain rooted in your practice, remember that you're not becoming passive. You're becoming free. Free to act when action is needed. Free to rest when rest is appropriate. Free to respond wisely rather than react automatically. Tomorrow brings what it brings: praise, criticism, storms, sunshine, all of it. But you're building something tonight that will be there tomorrow and every day after. Something no one can take from you. Something circumstances can't shake. Something real. The three qualities aren't the end of the path. They're the beginning of living free. We started tonight with words that held you hostage, criticism that wouldn't stop replaying, praise that left you empty and craving more. We end with something different. You, understanding why those words had so much power and how to take that power back. The three qualities we've explored aren't gifts you're waiting to receive. They're capacities you already have, right now, that just need practice to develop. Praise doesn't have to seduce you. Criticism doesn't have to crush you. You can remain rooted in something real, regardless of what anyone says. When the storms come, and they will come, you can return here. This wisdom doesn't disappear when the video ends. It waits for you whenever you need it. If something tonight resonated with you, leave a comment about which quality you'll practice first. And if you know someone who's being held hostage by words right now, someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. The Buddha taught that you already have Buddha nature, the seed of complete freedom, complete peace, complete clarity. It's not something you earn through years of perfect practice. It's something you uncover by removing the beliefs and patterns that hide it. The work isn't adding something you lack. It's clearing away what obscures what you already are. May this bring you peace. May this bring you freedom. And if sleep is calling you now, let it come. You don't need to hold on to these words. They've already done their work. Rest well